Hello everybody, as you can see we're making a tier list. Today's tier list, ShellShock live weapons. We have the wonderful amazing tier here. We have the great tier, the good tier, the meh or situational tier, the bad tier, and the counter 3000 tier for obvious reasons. So obviously amazing 100% is going to be weapons that pretty much no matter what are going to be good. Doesn't require much skill. Doesn't matter if you're playing rebound, doesn't matter if you have wind. Those sort of weapons that are kind of always high damage and very easy to get the hang of. And then the counter 3000 tier is, well, it's a counter 3000 tier.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And as a matter of fact, let's just put the counter 3000 in there. Counter 3000 is one of the worst weapons in the game. However, I think we actually need a new tier. Something no one should have to use. Something no one should even have to look at. And that is oddball tier. Oddball tier is exclusively for the oddball, whereas the counter 3000 tier, that I feel like there's probably at least one other weapon that can kind of fit there. The oddball is on a tier of its own. This thing never hits. The most this thing's probably ever gotten me was like 50 damage, maybe if I hit a double damage, I don't know. It's not good. All the weapons that we have here are tier 1s, and they do actually count for the whole tier, so like the entire branch of weapons. So the 3 counts for the counter 4000, the counter 5000, and the counter 6000. The nuke counts for the nuke and the mega nuke, and so on and so forth. If you're going to enjoy this video, a like would be massively appreciated. So here we go. 3D bomb. It's a good weapon. Kind of awkward to use, great damage though, and good for putting people in holes. Acid rain and acid hail. It's a great weapon. Damage wise, it requires some flat land, and if they're not on flat land, it doesn't do as much damage, and wind affects it a lot. This is a good weapon. Airstrike and all of its upgrades is a good weapon. Similar situation as acid rain. Arrow is just kind of a budget sniper, but it's a great weapon. Just have to be accurate. Asteroids is a good weapon. It just has some upgrades. It's kind of meh overall, but it does do good damage for the most part, I believe. Seagull is a very high damaging weapon if you arc it right, and it can actually become more powerful with wind, so that's a win. I actually think it's a great weapon because you can get hundreds of damage with that with very little effort. Backroller, it's a good weapon, but the damage is pretty meh. Banana is kind of just a worse arrow. The upgrades do good damage. It's good, but it's barely good. Battering ram, awkward weapon. One of the most awkward weapons in the game. I'm just going to say it's bad. The damage isn't even that great that it puts out, and its upgrades aren't even that impressive. Beacon, you do have to be accurate, and it kind of shoots like a flare or a grenade, but this thing does tons of damage. It's a great weapon. Beehive, killer bees, and wasps is an amazing weapon. It does not matter how accurate you are, you're still going to do damage. Obviously, the more accurate you are, the more damage you're going to do. Really good weapon. BFG 1000 and 9000, I'd say is a meh weapon. The damage can be pretty good at range, but it gets quite affected by wind, so overall it's just, it's a meh weapon. Black hole is another amazing weapon. More or less the same thing as Beehive. Bolt is an alright weapon. Like, it's not great. Even its upgrades aren't great. It's like a flare. You have to actually manage to land a flare close. It's easy to hit yourself with the upgrades. It's meh. Boomerang, it has its own trajectory path. It's different to every other weapon in the game. So it's quite a unique one, but its damage is just not there. And for that reason, it's meh. The Botherer and its upgrades. Pre-patch, this would have been in the amazing tier. This is still a good weapon though, and does great damage. So therefore, it is great. Can be a little awkward sometimes, but it's just a little bit of a learning curve. Bouncy Ball, the biggest meme weapon in the game. People normally just don't try and aim this. You can try and aim it, and it does alright damage. I'd say it's a meh weapon, just because it bounces higher with each bounce, and it can be quite hard to predict. Bounder. Bounder is a good weapon in the sense of usability, but in terms of damage, it is just a situational weapon. Bounce Blowed. It is quite a situational weapon. They do have to be like in a bit of a hole, and it's better if you are close so you can put a little like power on this, but the damage it provides pushes this into the good tier. Bounce Explode is kind of counter 3000 tier, honestly. The damage is pretty poor. Most of the balls that it drops usually won't hit. It's like average about 20-ish damage, and yeah, it's just not a great weapon. Breaker Madness. This is a really good weapon. Wind affects it quite heavily, but it still does good damage. I'm going to put this in the great tier. It's close to being in the good tier. The Breaker and its upgrades are just kind of bad. I feel like all of them aren't great no matter what. Probably the best one being Super Breaker, and even that does maybe like 40 damage. Builder and its upgrades, they do good damage and they're a good low level weapon. Ends up giving the opponent an advantage, and it's just going to be in the bottom of good tier for that. And while we're at it, I'll talk about the Digger, which is the exact same thing, but it digs them. This is a bit actually better because it does actually put the opponent in a disadvantageous position. And for that, it's actually going to go a couple higher, maybe a little higher than what we've actually got here. We have the Bulger, it's meh, bad damage, again, same thing as the Builder, it puts them in a good position, but it is a little bit easier to use than the Boomerang. Bumper Bombs, this is such a weird weapon. It's a high level weapon, but it does just, some of the projectiles bounce, some of them don't, is kind of awkward to use, especially for rebound. It's going to be a good weapon just because of the damage it does, but honestly, I'd probably rather just have a basic Builder in most cases. Cactus is actually a really good weapon. It's the upgrade that's not as good, but I'd say this is still a good weapon. Carpet Fire, Carpet Bomb, Carpet Fire, whatever this is called, and its upgrades. It's affected quite a bit by wind, but honestly, this is still a great weapon. The damage is really nice from these, and it doesn't damage the terrain, so that can be used strategically. The Cat and the Cat tree of weapons is mediocre for the most part. The Super Cat's good, but mostly mediocre. It is a good weapon set, but it's kind of a mid-good. The chicken weapons, chicken fling and all those, they're okay. I'm probably going to put these in the meh tier. Chopper and Apache, just because you have to get 1,000,000 XP to unlock them, I can't put this in amazing tier, but the damage and the way that they work is absolutely incredible. Super easy to use weapons and really great damage. So they're going to be pretty high in the great tier for that. Chunklet is basically, it's essentially just a normal shot. It does 45 damage and I believe Chunker does 50. So pretty mediocre damage. The crits on this is quite nice. Yeah, it's good, but it's also kind of meh. It's underwhelming, I guess, is what I would say. Clover and 4-leaf Clover, these are RNG weapons, and a lot of the time you will just hit like under 10 damage. So it can't be in great. I'd say when it does actually pop, the damage you can get on these is actually kind of crazy. So I'm probably just going to put it in the good tier, kind of around banana tier, honestly. Then we have Deadweight. Deadweight is a beginner's dream. I feel like I see so many noobs using this weapon just because in rebound, and I guess in general, it's just an easy weapon to use. It's got bad damage, and even its upgrade is the exact same thing. It's just a tunneler variant, and yeah, it's kind of a meh weapon overall. It's nice in the sense that it's easy hits, but the damage just isn't there. It's similar to the Bounder in that aspect, but I'd say the Bounder is probably better just because of the increased damage. Disco Ball. Actually, Disco Ball is a really good weapon, mostly because of its upgrade, Groovy Ball. This thing can drop on someone and hit for 50 damage, and it actually means it actually crits for 100. So this is actually really good. Even Disco Ball is pretty good. The damage is like not great, but I'd say it's a good weapon, definitely. Dollar Bills and whatever the rest of those weapons are called, Fat Stacks, is a really awkward weapon to use. The damage is fine, but this is just a meh weapon. Driller, this actually has a good tree with Slammer being the upgrade. Both of them do similar damage at about 70, and for that reason, it's honestly a great weapon. Drone, I would say, is probably the best noobish like rebound weapon. It typically gives you about 50, 40-ish damage. And for one of the weapons that is a guaranteed hit, I'd say that's pretty good. Dual Roller. This thing, you can actually hit every projectile, including the initial impact, and it does good damage. It's pretty easy to hit otherwise. You can hit yourself quite easily if you're not careful, but I'd say this is a good weapon. 60 damage is nothing to be scoffed at, and that's if you don't crit, I'm pretty sure. Early Bird. Early Bird is a really cool weapon. The upgrade is better, but this does 100 damage guaranteed every time, and that means you're guaranteed a 200 crit if you do crit. It's a great weapon. It is an absolutely great weapon. In fact, this is probably the best great weapon we have. This is, you know what, no, I'd actually say this is amazing, because this is very predictable and very easy to learn. Maybe not as easy as the other two we have in Amazing Tier, but it's a very easy shoot, do damage weapon. It's basically a better nuke. Earthquake is a situational item, which would make me want to put it in meh / in the situational tier, but I think Earthquake is the best situational item there because it's kind of one of a kind. It doesn't do much damage at all, but it can get you out of massive holes if you do happen to get stuck in them, especially for new players. Earthquake is a really, really powerful item to have, because especially what most people will do is if they see a new player, they're just going to use a digger on them so they can't get out and they can farm easy damage. But with an Earthquake, you've not really got to worry about that as much. The Jet and Heavy Jet actually takes the cake on what makes a good rebound weapon, I would say. It's actually a little bit better than Drone. The damage is okay and is fine, but yeah, I'd say this is more just a rebound weapon. Fireworks. Fireworks has probably the best scaling in the game in terms of like starting off as a good weapon, an early, like a low level weapon as well. I'd say it's one of the better early weapons, and yeah, it has good upgrades. Grand Finale's great, and Pyrotechnics is also great. A lot of area clear, a lot of damage. This is probably an amazing weapon, honestly. Blaze, Flame, and Inferno. These weapons do a lot of damage. I'd say they're just a worse version of Stream, though. And for that, they're just, you know, they're good. They're like, I'd say, sort of on par with how I feel about Acid Rain. Flasher. Flasher's a really easy weapon. It just, you hit them and it does damage the closer the projectile lands. Pretty much works the same as Black Hole. It's essentially just a worse Black Hole. But it is a great weapon. Flattener. Flattener and its upgrades are kind of just meme weapons, to be honest. They're weird and they're unique, but they don't really do a lot of damage. I'd say the best one probably is Wall, just because you can literally stop people even like being able to go past, unless they shoot it, obviously. But even with max track, you can't get past a wall. You've also got Funnel, and yeah, they're okay, they're fine, but the damage just isn't quite there. I'd say it's good. Or even meh, but it's low good, I'd say. Fleet. Fleet scales really well, but starting off with Fleet is really bad. I'd say it's probably a good weapon overall, though. Flintlock is kind of a meh weapon. The damage is good sometimes, other times it's really bad. It's kind of awkward to hit and do good damage with. So yeah, it's just a meh weapon, really. Flower and Bouquet, some of the best early game weapons in the entire game. They do great damage. They're somewhere in the great tier. Fountain and Waterworks are both really bad weapons, but the final upgrade, Sprinkler, is absolutely insane and can do like nearly 100 damage regularly. Very easy to hit, so this is automatically a good weapon. Fury and Rage. These are weapons I've not had that much experience using, just because I don't have them unlocked yet. I've played like 600 hours of ShellShock Live, and I still don't have this unlocked, by the way. The grind on this game is insane. I've been playing for years. When I have had this, it's kind of hit or miss on the damage it does. I want to say it's a good weapon and a high good weapon, probably the best good weapon I can say. I just don't think I'm qualified to say if this is a great weapon or not. I don't know if it really fits with these. I certainly don't think it does, because when I have had the chance of using it, it's certainly never been as consistent as, say, a Driller or, well, any of these great weapons, really. Ghost Bomb, it's easy to hit people with. Its upgrade is the exact same. It just does a tiny bit more damage and shoots more projectiles. Very easy to hit people with, but honestly, it's in the meh or situational tier. Glock and its upgrades are pretty meh again, unless you're hitting crits on the Desert Eagle. It's fine. Like, you won't be too upset using it. I can't say it's good, though. God Rays and Deity are very good weapons. I'd say these are great weapons. Insane damage, heavily affected by wind, but if you don't play with wind, or if you get used to just shooting the flare right, this thing is brutal, especially on like flat land. Great weapon. It's one of those weapons that should be in situational, but just because of the damage it does, it's beyond good. Gravies and Gravits is fine. It's just a fine weapon. I'd say it goes in the good tier because we don't have a fine tier. We have a meh tier, but I'd say this is right at the bottom of good. Grenade is an amazing weapon. Now you're thinking Grenade only does 50 damage. Its upgrades do considerably more. And apart from the last one, actually, the last upgrade lets it down, but I honestly think the 3 tiers before it make up for that last upgrade. But yeah, Grenade across the board, really great weapon. Just make sure the opponent's in a hole and you're pretty much guaranteed 50 or 100 damage if you crit. And more if you're using an upgrade. Guppies and the upgrades, Minnows and Goldfish, it's fine. It's fine. Hidden Blade, it's fine. In fact, I tell you what, I'll go through all of the fine weapons and we'll just like quick fire them. Shot, it's fine. Horizon, it's fine. Jumper, it's fine. Actually, no, it's not fine. Jumper's pretty bad, honestly. Jumper's just a worse splitter, in my opinion. Moons, it's situational, but it's fine. Pixel, it's fine. Palm, it's bad. Riot, it's fine. Good damage, kind of bad weapon though. Rain is just straight up bad. Ringer is actually a good weapon, but it's going to be like in the middle of good just because I won't say it's just fine because its upgrades do a lot of damage. Yeah. Kernels is a good weapon. Its upgrades are better. The original one is pretty meh. So it's going to be low good. Overall, good weapon. M4 is also a good weaponry. Pretty like great honestly in terms of damage, but just because of the nature of the gun weapons, it's just in the good tier. One bounce, the upgrades do insane damage, very easy to use, great weapon. Pepper alone isn't a great weapon, salt and pepper isn't great. It's the two upgrades after that that are added later down the line that are actually pretty insane and turn this weapon into a really good weapon. And I want to say it's great because of how easy it is to use. Mini V and Big V are both weapons that are just kind of boring to me, but the damage is a lot of the time pretty good, so I'm gonna put it in a good tier. Portal gun, it's a good weapon in terms of damage. It is just in the good tier though. It's very easy to use, but yeah, its damage is just fine. Nuke, this might upset some people, but I don't think Nuke belongs in amazing tier. Nuke, yes, it hits for 80 damage. Mega Nuke hits for 100. There are just the ones up there that are just better, I think. More consistent. Nuke is just, it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly not an amazing tier weapon. Shockwave is meh. Silly Balls is meh. Shock Shell is actually useful, but again, damage meh. Rapid Fire would be in bad, but its upgrades get considerably better, and so I'd say it's a good weapon. Snowball is a pretty good weapon. You've just got to get it to bounce a few times, and its upgrade is not great, but yeah, bottom of good. High risk, high reward. Square is a weapon that you can do a lot of damage with, especially the upgrades. I feel like the reward you get for pulling it off probably isn't too fantastic though, damage wise, so it's just in the good tier. Pinata, it's pretty bad honestly. The damage just isn't great. The upgrade isn't fantastic either. Tangent Fire, that's another, honestly I'd say bad weapon. I'm never happy to get this. I think the most damage I've really seen this do without double damage is probably about 50, and especially a weapon you can choose not to have, 100% just don't pick it up. Static, I'd say, is a meh weapon. It's not bad because it can go through multiple enemies, but generally speaking, I just play 1v1s. Its damage isn't great, but yeah, for some people out there, it might be better. Rainbow, you pretty much have to arc, and for that reason, it's meh. The damage is alright though. Skeet, the damage can be good. Maybe it's just a skill issue, but I don't think this is very consistent at all. It's just meh. It either does like 10 damage or it does like 70, and it's most of the time 10. Pinpoint is a weapon a bit like Grenade in the sense that if you hit it, it does tons of damage. But the issue with Pinpoint is that you have to hit it, and Pinpoint is much harder to hit than Grenade, and for that reason, it's just a good weapon. High good, but it is just a good weapon. Jack-o'-lantern's a difficult one because the upgrade Jack-o'-vomit is absolute poo, but regular jack-o'-lantern is good, so I've got to put it in the good tier. Jammer is a useful weapon to have, especially for getting people like down into holes and stuff. It does pretty good damage, especially the upgrades, so it's a good weapon. Hoverball is a little bit more of a skillful weapon to get the hang of, but it does very good damage and is super consistent. It's a great weapon. Homing missile and homing rockets, both very easy to hit with. If there's a double damage on the screen, you can hit it, you're going to do tons of damage. This is an amazing weapon. Basically just free damage. Imploder and ultimate imploder, I'm pretty sure it just like halves your health, does 200 to the enemy. Maybe this is good in some situations. I'm not level 100, so I've not had enough chances to use it, so I can't really say. If you're a level 100, let me know in the comments. Yeah, I'd say this is probably just a meh weapon overall. I want to say good because of the damage it can put out, but I don't know. It's a weird one. Jackpot and its upgrades. Honestly, some of my favorite weapons in the game. Requires a bit of skill to use. By skill, I mean just look on the wiki and see just see what power you need to shoot it at. But yeah, overall, pretty damn good weapon. A lot of damage, even better if you crit. Really good. Kamikaze and the other one, which I don't know if I can say on YouTube. This is a good weapon. It's just very hard to hit with, so it's going to be just middle of good tier, but it does do great damage when it does hit. Very consistent damage as well if it does hit. You'll either hit 30 or you'll hit like 100 most of the time. Laser beam and all of its upgrades do great damage. It hits anyone across the screen. It goes in a straight line. This thing is a pretty amazing weapon, honestly. You can't really go wrong with it, apart from maybe just getting your angle wrong, and that's kind of a you issue, skill issue. Madbirds and its upgrades is controversial one, probably. I'd say this is a meh weapon. Like, the damage is good, but the chances of hitting all the birds in the random situations that you get yourself into in ShellShock Live is less than likely. I kind of feel the same about Madbirds as I do about Jack-o'-vomit. This entire tree just becomes more like Jack-o'-vomit, and there's more of them, so yeah. filling up more of the weapon pool. Therefore, it's just not as good. And damage isn't fantastic. Magnets, awesome weapon, great weapon. Attractoids, that really brings it down. Just like the Jekyll Vomit, I would say this is probably still a high good weapon though, for some consistent damage most of the time. Mini Pinger, pretty bad. Pinger, bit better. And Ping Flood, great. So this just gradually gets better. I'd say this is a high good weapon. Mini Turret and Turret Trio or whatever it's called is pretty good. Consistent damage, I'd actually say this is a great weapon. Kind of on par with the Nuke almost. Minions, actually an underrated weapon. I see most people saying like, you'll be in a game and someone will say I've only got bad weapons and then proceed to use minions and like hit you for 60 damage. And if they crit, even more. So I actually say that minions is a good weapon. I think it's a little bit hated on for no reason. Molehill it does good damage, but its upgrade doesn't do as much damage. It does hit more though. It's an RNG weapon. It's kind of meh. I wish it did more damage, or I wish it just kind of followed a little more the actual trajectory it goes in the ground. It just kind of has a mind of its own, and for that reason it has to be in meh. Napalm is one of the best weapons in the game in terms of its scaling. It has to be in the amazing tier. Napalm does great damage, Heavy Napalm does great damage, and Firestorm can do incredible damage. Needler is an amazing weapon. It absolutely demolishes enemies. The upgrade is even better. Pretty much guaranteed 100 damage. Division and Partition are both pretty consistent weapons, so I'd put them in the great tier. They do like 70-ish damage, but it's like really easy to hit and you can't hit yourself with it. I actually think Payload is better than its upgrade. Magic Rain, I think it's called. Magic Shower. It's actually, you can crit this for 120 pretty easily. I'd say it's a great weapon, and its upgrade is still good. So yeah, I think it does belong in the great tier. It's a bit more of a skillful one. Penetrator, most people probably want me to put this in the counter 3000 tier, and I kind of want to do that as well. If you get this on some flat land, you can actually do a ton of damage, especially if you're at the bottom of the map. This thing can be insane. It's just that 90% of the time it's not insane, and it's actually pretty garbage. So I'm going to put this in the high meh tier. I'd actually say this is probably the highest meh weapon, maybe close with like Imploder, and I'm not going to shuffle these around too much. I'm just going to kind of leave them as they are. Pentagram and its upgrade Pentaslam, both pretty insane weapons. Kind of weird. Most people probably won't agree. I think this thing can hit and pretty much consistently hits for like damage. It's like nuke-ish damage most of the time. I'd say it's a pretty great weapon, although just because of the way it shoots, I don't know if I can put it in great because it does have its inconsistencies, but it is definitely high good. Permaroller, this is 100% a skill issue. I struggle to hit these things, but when they do hit, they do really good damage. So I'm going to put this in the good tier, but I think because of the high skill ceiling, I can't really put it any higher. Puzzler, Baffler, and I forget what the other one's called. These are pretty much shoot and forget weapons. They are, I'd say, great weapons. You hit them and they do a lot of damage. It's also got decent range, so if there's any opponent tanks, if you're playing in a team game, you'll probably hit them as well and get a bit more damage. Sandstorm, great weapon. And Desert, I think it's called Sandstorm anyway. Really good weapon. Puts people in holes, can't really complain. You just arc it on people and you're just, yeah, it's free damage. It's a lot of the time a free win. Radar, very good weapon. Very good weapon. Amazing weapon, in fact. I don't know how to explain this one, but if you have two tanks near each other, they both get stuck with a sticky bomb from the radar, then they will both take the damage of both of the bombs that get planted on the separate tanks. I'll do a demonstration because I don't think I can actually explain this one well enough, but you should see what I mean. Enroller, this thing does really good damage, but it is kind of awkward to use, especially with wind. I'm going to put this in the great tier because of the damage that these do. Recruiter, Enroller, and whatever the other one's called. They are great weapons. I'd actually say they're probably a bit better than Puzzler, but it's a tough one. Relocator, and I forget what the other one's called. Teleport Bomb, I think, or something like that. This weapon is good damage-wise. It's pretty consistent. It's kind of like a portal gun, I think, damage-wise. But it teleports the tank, and that is kind of annoying a lot of the time, I think. So it's just going to go in the good tier for me. Rocket Fire, this weapon is so awkward, but the damage it can do is there. I'm going to put it in just the good tier, honestly. Roller, this is just a better back roller. Back roller is just a worse roller, I guess, so they're pretty much in the same tier. Satellite, this thing is pretty consistent. It's kind of like just level 1 grenade, even its upgrade is more or less the same thing, but because it doesn't get any better, it's just in the good tier. Sausage, this thing can do a ton of damage and is actually really easy to do. It puts people in holes. Yeah, it's a great weapon. Saw Blade and Saw Blade's upgrades, Diamond Blade and Ripsaw. They are pretty good. They can go through multiple tanks. It's essentially just a longer roller. Yeah, good weapon. Decent damage as well. Shadow and its upgrades, pretty big explosion, so you can often hit multiple tanks. And the damage it does is pretty good as well. It's honestly, I want to say it's a great weapon, but the damage just isn't quite there for a great weapon. So it's just going to go in high good. Shank, this weapon is so consistent. You either hit 80 damage or you hit 160 damage. And if you don't hit, it's because you're an idiot. So yeah, this is a great weapon. Shrapnel, insane damage. You've just got to make sure it actually lands directly on the enemy, which can be a little difficult, but this is a good weapon. Sinkhole and its upgrades do pretty damn good damage. So I want to say actually this is a great weapon. Really consistent and pretty easy to hit multiple tanks again. Skull Shot and Skeleton. Skeleton's much better, but they typically hit for at least 60 damage, so it's a good weapon. Snake, this is a great weapon. It's got a bit of RNG. If it didn't have as much RNG and it consistently like hit more, it'd be an amazing. Just because the snake tree does insane damage. It's basically just a better digger most of the time. Other times it's pretty much just like really bad, but most of the time it's good. Sniper's an amazing weapon. All of its upgrades are great. The further away you are, the more damage you do. Sub-sniper does the most. The final upgrade is guaranteed to hit, well, not guaranteed to hit, but you mark an enemy, and if you shoot out 8 marks, if one of the marks hits, then you get your sniper shot. It's super consistent, super easy, good damage. Spaz, I want to put this in the amazing tier because it can do so much damage. It can create the funniest moments, but sadly it's just going to have to be a great weapon because it can do bad damage, but I feel like more often than not it does good damage. And if it doesn't do good damage, you get like 1 damage and you leave a massive like nuke-sized hole, which is pretty funny. And I think that still just counts for it being a great weapon. Spider, this is really good for team fights. Not that great damage-wise a lot of the time. It is a good weapon though. Spiker and Super Spiker, pretty consistently good damage as long as you use it right. That's actually a great weapon. Splitter is pretty consistent again, and Splitter Chain absolutely gives this thing the great tier. Splitter Chain does insane damage, one of the best weapons in the game. Spotter, this thing, just if you hit them, it does damage. It's a lot like the sniper or the arrow, and for that reason, it's right next to the arrow in great tier. Sprouter and Blossom, these are both pretty good weapons, pretty good damage. I'd actually say they are in the great tier. Starfire, this has an upgrade which has complete RNG, but the RNG is for insane damage. The weapon itself does very consistent damage. This is a great weapon with caution because Shooting Star is not always a great weapon. Sticky Bomb is not a great weapon, but all of its upgrades are pretty damn good in their own right. Good for putting people in holes and also dealing some decent damage along the way. This is probably going to be in the great tier because, yeah, I think it belongs there. Good damage, good usability. Boulder is an amazing weapon. Boulder, the Fire Stone one and Stone Fireball, I think it's called, is the last upgrade. Some of the best weapons in the game. Fireball does absolutely insane damage, especially if you can hit them a ton. It drops little pieces of fire, they do damage. The regular Stone does good damage and the Boulder does good damage. Really consistent if you can get this picked up early on. Stream, I'd say, is another really consistent one. It kind of sits where Flame sits, though, in that it is good, but you have to be kind of accurate with it. Summoner, this, if they're on flat land, does pretty damn good damage and is very consistent, but I just don't think it can fit in that great tier. Then we have, what's this one called? Solar Flare and Sunburst, I think. Very consistent, better if they're on a spike. The damage isn't always there, wind affects it a lot. It's just going to have to be a good weapon, but it's a shame because the damage it can provide is pretty impressive sometimes. Sunflower or Helianthus, I think it's called. Very weird weapon. Does pretty good damage most of the time though, so I'd say it's pretty great. It is, however, heavily affected by a wind, so take that with a grain of salt if you play with wind. Sinklets, this is an insanely good weapon. It's just consistent damage. Its upgrade is even more damage. Really easy to use weapon. Just literally, it's a better rapid fire. Tadpoles, even the first upgrade for this is insane, but I will say it's better if you snipe people. The further distance you are, the more damage they do. They do 10 damage per tadpole. This thing at level 1 can hit, I'm pretty sure, at least 100 damage. So that's pretty insane. And that's without crits. Taser, very horrible, awkward to use weapon unless you're like right close to someone. But the damage it provides is pretty insane. so it is good. 3-ball and its upgrades are very consistent and definitely belong in the great tier. The first 3-ball doesn't do great damage, but 5-ball and above is all pretty insane damage, and they're also pretty useful for getting people stuck in holes. Maybe not stuck in holes, but deepening a hole or putting them in what will become a bigger hole. Ninja Star is probably the most underrated shop weapon. If you hit someone while they are like on a steep wall, which is pretty common, this thing can actually do very consistently good damage, and I want to put this in the good tier just because it's a bit awkward to use, but once you get the hang of it, can do pretty insane things with. Train, it's the same thing as a roller, it just does more damage, and it's pretty good damage at that, so it's a great weapon. Travelers, this thing either does like 16 or 200 damage, but just being able to do 200 damage with a weapon puts it in the great tier for me. Tunneler, as it is, isn't great, but all of its upgrades, I'd say, are pretty great, so it goes in the great tier. Tweeter, you have to be pretty accurate with, but its upgrades less so. They all provide great damage, and for that reason, it's a great weapon. Twinkler, awkward to use weapon, doesn't really provide too much damage without the upgrades. It ends up being a good weapon. It starts off as a bad weapon, so it just belongs in the good tier. Uzi, it's pretty much the same as the M4, so it's going to go right next to it. Volcano, it's just a bulger but with fire, and so for that reason, it's just a meh weapon. Wacky Cluster, Crazy Cluster, and Kooky Cluster. These are pretty nuts weapons. These can do crazy damage. I think the one that has the digger, I think that might be the last one, is incredible. Like, that's consistent hundreds. For me, this is one of my favorite weapons in the game. Water Balloon, not great. Water Trio, better. And Water Fight, very better. Really good weapons for just chucking for when someone's in a hole. Pretty much guaranteed 40 plus damage most of the time. Especially if using the upgrades, it should be more than that. It's a great weapon. It's a consistent weapon. Maybe the damage isn't always great, but it's consistent that it does regularly do good damage. Wicked Witch, the best shop item, I would say. Direct impact, 66 damage. It gets better with the upgrades. I'd say this is an amazing weapon just because you can buy it at such an early level and it is so consistent. X attack and O attack. These are both really good weapons. They work pretty much the same as like 3-ball does, but they do more damage. And for that reason, it's in the great tier. Yin Yang, it's not a great weapon. Its upgrade is also not great. It's a meh weapon. Zipper, it's a very boring weapon and I hate it with a burning passion. I can't tell you why, but every time I see someone use a zipper, I just don't want to play anymore. Yeah, it does consistent damage. It doesn't do great damage, but it does do consistent damage, so it kind of has to go in the good tier, I guess. And that is my ShellShock Live Weapons tier list. Let me know if you disagree with any of my decisions. Let me know if you agree with any of my decisions, and I'll see you all in the next video.